We would like to thank you for joining us for the 28th edition of the Annual Investment Meeting webinar series. My name is Isa Lois and I'll be your MC for today. The Annual Investment Meeting is the largest investment platform in the world, an initiative of the UAE Ministry of Economy. AIM has been promoting a healthier global economy by linking investment opportunities to fast-growing economies under 6 key pillars: foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, small and medium enterprise, startups, and future cities, with a special event, One Belt, One Road. We would like to thank our multilateral partner, Islamic Corporation, for the development of the private sector for sponsoring today's webinar. We would also like to thank our knowledge partners, GDP, Global, and Frost and Sullivan for partnering and developing this webinar. Just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. If you experience any issues with your audio or video during the webinar, just refresh your browser and that should take care of everything. We would suggest using Chrome, Firefox, Safari, or Microsoft Edge. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the question tab in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you like a specific question, vote for it under the question tab so we can address to our speakers. During the webinar, we'll be running live polls located beside the question tab, and we would request you to participate by casting your votes. The topic for today's webinar is Smart Cities of the Future workshop. This session will discuss pandemic impact on urban environments, how smart cities use the latest technologies to drive new solutions, critical success factors for successful implementation of smart cities, how smart city environments can attract diverse FDI projects in various forms. And last will be strategy checklists and roadmaps for 10-year smart city transformation. In today's webinar, we are joined by Mr. John Hanna, Director of GDP Global, Mr. Manny James, Senior Vice President of Frost and Sullivan, and Mr. Paul Whiteway, Director of GDP Global. Mr. Manny, the floor is yours.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. So, alluding to this topic of the smart cities of the future, what I would like to focus today is on giving you an overview of the kind of coverage that we do at a little bit with Frost and Sullivan in terms of what are the focus on smart cities that we do. And more importantly, talking about what are those key impact of the future of everything that's going to change from work to workplace to technology, and how is this urban environment going to change itself. So a little bit about Frost and Sullivan in terms of the smart city focus. We have a focus about 130 cities that we cover globally as part of our focus. Frost and Sullivan is a global advisory and management consulting firm, and what we do is we track all of these parameters, a number of parameters to measure the smart city performance and their effectiveness. And this association that we have with GDP Global and with the AIM Congress kind of leads into this very nicely, because we are able to bring together a wide and a rich focus on investment promotion, which my colleagues Paul and John would talk about later. So the demand for smart cities, as you would expect after COVID-19, is going to increase. The reason is pretty straightforward, that you're going to see what is being done across the smart cities and what is the importance of the smart cities is that now a lot of the technology tools that have been used is to, for example, if you look at places like Singapore, they have got the Trace Together application, which is to aid the contact tracing. If you look at places like Chennai, where I come from, and we have an application that actually identifies symptomatic patients, whether they are likely to get a COVID-19 or not, just to reduce the burden on the healthcare system. So, I mean, if you go into more of a smart city application, you're looking at they're going to be equipped with service to deal with the pandemic. So do we have the necessary medical services to cope with the pandemic? So this could be through a partnering or with existing healthcare centers. Are we going to build more new hospitals? So I think there is a lot of elements of understanding what would a smart look like. And again, a smart township will have the potential to manage a pandemic more faster. So the urban environment by itself lends more towards it in terms of looking at how the pandemic will be more alien to bringing together more smart solutions into the picture. Moving on to this part of the presentation, which is the future of everything, which I like to call it. I'm going to stop here and ask him to run the poll, the first poll for the day. And you will see the question is, having seen the effects of COVID-19, what would you consider would be the biggest impact it has on the future? So you've got to select one. So I think the reason for choosing this is to kind of, you will see the more aspects of this to go to, whether it's going to be personal, is it going to be as an individual, is it for you, if it's more from a organization perspective. So I'm just trying to understand what are some of your thoughts and what do you think are the effects of COVID on the future. Let's give them about 10 more seconds. All right, so, all right. So can we have the results? All right, so it's quite interesting that you see there 40% of or 38% says digital transformation, 27% thinks it's more deployment of technology, and between the work and the workplace, it's only between 18% each. So it's a quite interesting mix. I'll try and give you a little bit more context of all of this, but I think it's quite interesting to see that everybody sees digital transformation as a key aspect of the future, which is actually good news to begin with. So what I would like to spend some time with you is to give you a perspective of what is the future of the labor force, that's number one, and what is the future of the place of work that we're going to be involved in, and the future of the workplace technology. So this three aspects, in my view, has a deeper impact on the smart cities of the future, and as a result of how governments are going to play out, looking at their citizens, how do you develop smart citizens, how do you bring in investment promotion, what are the different types of scenarios. So you look at the workforce itself, the future of work segments, if I call it this way, we have three major components, right? So you have the workplace, which is where you go to work, the workforce, which is the labor force, which is you and me, who are actually involved in the day-to-day business, and the technology aspect of it. So the future technologies, the future work structures is going to be more of, you're going to be having mobile infrastructure, you've got technologies, more devices, and more smart work centers. So the pandemic that has now resulted in what we have, I think it's pretty clear that the way that we are doing this webinar online, we are actually interacting with our colleagues with more devices. It's pretty much clear that you're going to have more real-time collaboration channels. So for us, at Frost & Sullivan, the vision for the future of work is this is one, we're going to see this where there is a more of a modular workplace. So you will have more interconnected mobile workforces that will have more sound setup, blocking nearby conversations, so you don't actually have to listen to all your conversations. So you have the first modular workplace. It's more going to be an office on demand. People are not going to be required to come into the offices regularly. So how are you going to use those kiosks, mobile applications to reserve your office rooms? I already have examples of how companies are contemplating that we're going to come make the employees come to work only the 3 days in a week or 2 days in a week. You're going to have more technology, which is in terms of the telepresence and telecommute. So you've got to have connectivity through high definition video, video conferencing, and social communicating tools. It's already becoming a I would say, a main force, but I think this will be of the future. You're going to have more of this to use. Again, another aspect of you're going to talk here is the crowdsourcing, which is how do you actually collaborate with the individuals supporting projects initiated by other individuals. So you're going to have more collaborating tools on how you're going to bring them into executing a project. And then companies will start to encourage you bring your own device, bring your own applications, bring your own technology. So I think it's all of those BIODs that we're going to see going forward. And the desktop virtualization, which is going to give you a wide variety of wireless services that you could use to see what's happening on everybody's desktop and mobile phones. So if you look at the possible scenarios of how urbanization's shifts is happening due to the pandemic, from here you'll see that the urbanization was expected to boom with majority of the population to be living in the cities. That's what we thought pre-COVID. But due to the pandemic, people are actually moving out to more suburban areas, which can lead to population being distributed in smaller clusters, and that is what we are actually seeing at the moment. Even in advanced countries, you see that in developed markets like in India, in Africa, in developing markets, you are going to see that this is becoming a phenomenon where people are going to start moving out of the dense neighborhoods. And from a workplace standpoint, you are actually going to find this more interesting in terms of how this is going to affect the real estate footprints going forward. Because of the way that I explained this to you earlier on, what we believe is that because of the mobile work style strategies that we predict, there will be an overall 17% decrease in the end of by 2020 on the real estate footprint. There is another argument which says that look, because of the pandemic, you're going to have more and more more space required because there's going to be social distancing. You got to keep that in the offices. But I think it's pretty clear that it will be a long shot in terms of how people are going to be moving into the offices full time. So it's going to be 17% office space, 15% less, fewer desks, knowledge workers from 8 desks to about 10 desks in 2010. It's going to become 7 in 2020. And across the different countries that we have benchmarked, obviously these are all advanced countries, but you'll see that the way that the real estate is going to play out is definitely going to be a reduction in office space. What does it mean for an urban environment, and what does it mean for economic development agencies, for city planners? How are you going to revisualize these office spaces? So if you look at from a remote working pattern, you're going to have more automation. It's going to be, as I said, more on-site versus off-site. People are going to be more skewed towards working from home. We'll say we absolutely need meetings. We will come into the meetings. Otherwise, we don't see the necessity of us coming into those office spaces. You're going to have new technologies that you're going to adopt for remote working. We already see that. Another major implication that I believe is on the workplace is the commuting or the mobility, where the reduction in mobility itself will start to see that more companies will discourage people from coming into the offices. So you'll have the employees themselves are opting out to saying, look, we'll actually prefer working from home. So that as a result will decline the mobility aspects of solutions that has to be worked out. I believe that a lot of individuals will want to drive on their own rather than making the public transport if it's more palatable, more feasible for them. And again, the real estate's decline, that is pretty clear, because in terms of the new offices that might come up might not necessarily be in the cities, but it might actually move towards a more suburban setup. And expat employees who are well positioned for a remote role, they could be relocated to their home country. They're saying, look, we are happy where we are. We don't see the necessity to move into an urban location again. And as far as an organizational impact is concerned, I think the remote working will gain a lot of traction. There are cost considerations, a lot of the challenges in terms of working better. There is a work-life balance that you're going to see, which is, I'm sure in this last 3 months, a lot of you might have already started to experience it, because now you could have a flexible schedule. You don't have to commute. There's more minimal requirements of an office space. You don't have to actually set up all this infrastructure. But I think more and more companies will look at saying, why do we provide all these travel allowances and you can cut them? And as a large work pool, you'll be located across the geographies. All right, so coming to the workforce, which is you and me. So what is that new workforce going to look like? So I believe there is a lot of play in terms of new emerging business models, new employment models. They're going to come out. And I believe as economic development agencies, I see a number of you on the call. I've seen many colleagues from the past I have worked with. You would see that how do you bring about a new regulation, a policy framework that governs these kind of business models. So you'll have people like in freelance brokering, a lot of third-party connects with skilled laborers and workforce that you'll have one-time contracts. How are you going to deal with micro-tasking, uses remote unskilled labor, how you use dispersed networks. So organizations relies on full-time remote employees with flexible working arrangements. And you'll have a lot of these uncollared labor market too, which is a third party which assembles a collective of workers to perform a function which is like similar to what we do at Juba. So in terms of the key influencers that you'll see, there's a proliferation of new employment models. You might saying, look, I want you to only work for X amount of contracts. There's going to be enabling technologies, which is in terms of mobile connectivity. Again, there's go peer-to-peer and invisible payment modes that is going to be the future. With regards to the technology, there is going to be a host of technologies that we are actually going to be witnessing in terms of the future working structures. So we have the cloud platform, which is quite a phenomenon that we are witnessing already. The data storage and the cloud access that we have, which is in terms of the different conference platforms, the one that we are doing already right now, Zoom, WebEx, Teams, you name them, there's a lot of conference platforms. Data security, cyber security will become a major aspect of what we are going to be talking because of the remote working conditions. How do you ensure that this element of data security is present in your systems? A lot of virtual desktop interface, so you would actually want to witness what's happening in your colleague's phone, they want to share the screen. So how do you actually enable all these virtual desktop interface? Messaging platforms, WhatsApp, Slack, all of the startups that you already have been using, these messaging platforms are going to be playing a major role in terms of technology. And lastly, the way to manage these projects is going to become more technology oriented with all these tools available. So I don't want to spend too much of time on this specific case study, but I just wanted to put you out there that how companies are starting to look at the technology implementation, how they are offering cutting edge solutions to enable new ways of working. Cisco has already come up with how do you work seamlessly between a municipality, a hospital, where you have the Cisco data centers, the real estate, urban development consortiums, the national broadband providers, and you look at a stakeholder ecosystem in which you as an economic development agency have to look at this more from a smart city that's able to provide them with these kind of a platform for them to provide, because you're going to provide a host of networking services right from from a physical infrastructure to a network services to a stakeholder ecosystem that you got to manage. So across all of this, you will see a number of countries, number of cities starting to focus on data centers. So they're going to invite it's a new opportunity area, which I believe will be a critical component of this technology implementation. You're going to see a number of these investments going into the specific space. So why am I focusing on the work scenarios? It's as a result, the result of this has got huge implications on the way how future smart cities will be played out, how future economic development agencies will start to look at investment promotion. So you look at between what is a pre-COVID and the post-COVID, or only highlight on the nature of work. You had a very rigid structure. You're saying you've got to come from 8 to 12. It's a fixed work structure. Now you're going to say we're going to have a more flexible work structure. You look at employees who are very restricted. Now you're going to have a more mobile dispensed and easily accessible smart working solutions. You're going to have anytime work anywhere. You could take holidays. You could take your break anytime you want. You'll also see that the way the medium operates, you had computers, laptops, and tablets. Now you're going to get into more smart systems. And again, the workplace, which is more human based, now it's going to become more human machine collaboration with more mobile robots who are actually going to replace labor. I think this is a very critical part, as maybe you might not see it in a developing country right away. But I believe that this is going to be a critical element of how cities are going to be start to implement some of these future technologies. So lastly, I would like to focus on what does a smart citizen want, literally. Today, if you want to live in a smart city, I would believe that you would need to have a sense of belonging, right? So you need to, so I belong in this place. Is it more safe? Because I'm going to voluntarily provide my usable personal data, which is going to be in a more secured manner. And that's because it's for my good, but I also need to have the trust element. You have to have a neighborhood pride. You want to have make sure that all the tech, your neighborhood is tech friendly with more free Wi-Fi. You're more accessible. It's more interactive social discovering. You're going to have more walkable communities, bikes. So it's more specific what you want to drive to work, or you want to more bicycle to work, and more renewable energy based, responsible waste management, and where you are as a citizen able to participate, and the opportunity that you want to actually have a better quality of life through all this technology, and to make a more better impactful better decisions for yourself. And you want to have a real-time monitoring of all your energy usage, your traffic volumes. So you have to have more interactivity with the city and with various technologies that's going to actually make this more as a smart citizen, and you want to actually live in the smart cities. So my last would I'll just focus on what will be the critical factors, so success factors for a successful implementation. So if you're looking at from a smart city, which my colleagues Paul and John would cover this in more detail, but I believe that you got to look at areas which is the governance, investment models. How do you actually going to handle data? Or what kind of IoT and platforms that you as a city are able to provide, and how do you actually encourage different business models? So there are key lessons that we need to learn. But I think one important business model, I would say, is a strategic shift that every economic development agency or anybody who's going to look into invest should look for is how do you make the strategic investment decision on the most city's future economy? Are you able to identify your future city themes that resonates with your smart city plans and with the smart citizen? And how do you actually prioritize the digital training for all citizens? How do you make the citizens more digital savvy? And how do you build up a PPP ecosystem that specializes in a smart city concept? So in a nutshell, I just want to conclude the saying there are implications for your work, there are implications for the workplace, and there are implications for the technologies that we are going to go. And as the poll pointed out, so you have a lot of digital transformation challenges that are going to be embraced both by a citizen and by a city. And how do you provide this platform and come up with innovative business models that will help you to implement and become a smart city and a smart state for the future? So with that, I'm going to conclude, and let's continue our discussion. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's my page there. I'm more than happy to share all the stuff that we do about the future, on how the future cities are going to evolve. And for now, I'm going to hand it back to Paul Whiteway, my colleague at GDP Global. Over to you, Paul.
Hello, and thank you very much indeed to AIM for hosting this webinar, and also for the ongoing cooperation with Frost & Sullivan. Before I start my presentation, I'd like to draw attention to a couple of polls, which I hope are going to be going up shortly. One addresses the question, how big is your city? The other one asks the question, how developed is your economy? Hopefully we'll have some time to delve into the answers a little later. So here, to begin with, is the agenda for the discussion that John and I are going to be leading. We're going to be looking at concepts of smart cities, smart city projects, and the technologies that apply to them. We'll be looking at the impact of COVID-19, the policy implications for smart cities, and then looking again at critical success factors, some case studies, and a typical 10-year smart city transformation. So let's begin with the issue of definition. There is actually no single accepted interpretation of what constitutes a smart city. A meta-study of smart city definitions by Rama Prasad and others concludes that a smart city is one that maximizes the utilization of networked infrastructures to improve economic and political efficiency and enable social, cultural, and urban development. In practice, different smart city concepts are being applied within this broad definition. I'm going to discuss 3 examples. Starting with the connected environment. A smart city is a municipality that uses information and communication technologies to increase operational efficiency, share information with the public, and improve both the quality of government services and citizen welfare. A smart city is a framework predominantly composed of ICT to develop, deploy, and promote sustainable development practices to address growing urbanization challenges. A big part of this ICT framework is essentially an intelligent network of connected objects and machines comprising the Internet of Things that transmit data using 5G wireless technology and the cloud. Citizens engage with smart city ecosystems in a variety of ways, using smartphones, connected cars, and homes. Pairing devices and data with a city's physical infrastructure and services can cut costs and improve sustainability. The next definition is the smart city administration. This is sometimes called the India model. It's more specific. As can be seen in the model, smart city principles should be applied to at least 2 areas of the built environment. This model focuses on efficient city administration in key areas such as e-governance, waste management, energy management, water management, urban mobility, and other areas, including health, education, housing, skills, and work. The third concept I want to discuss is the so-called citizens' environment. The citizens' environment concept, on the other hand, is focused on the citizens as beneficiaries of the smart city. They enjoy benefits such as improved public safety, reduced pollution, better waste management, easier parking, more efficient streetlights, less traffic congestion, better access to education, greater knowledge of municipal budgets and policies, more efficient homes, and so forth. I'm now going to talk about some specific thematic areas which are typical of the smart city approach. You'll immediately recognize that many of these technologies are already in use in major cities. Others, however, are still at the experimental stage. The following slides illustrate some potential projects that fit within the broad parameters of each of these themes. They're not intended, of course, to be comprehensive. I'm sure that you'll be able to think of other examples. So the first general concept or theme is about e-government, which of course is about the delivery of services to citizens by digital means. So for example, a city web portal consolidates existing data which is dispersed around various websites in physical locations such as libraries or not publicly accessible, and makes it available to municipal governments and citizens. It is based on open data principles. Certain services may be provided online, including unified utility billing based on smart meters and e-health services. E-government requires secure, robust IT infrastructure, including 5G networks and data centers with stable power. A strong legal framework that provides effective data protection will give citizens the confidence to share their personal data. Next is the theme of digital city mapping. Digital maps are important for planning purposes and should also be accessible to all under the open data principle. This includes street names, allotment sizes, building envelopes, topography. As information becomes more available, additional map layers will include, for example, location of street trees, on-street parking, lighting, rubbish collection dates, or utilities, thereby providing a much greater degree of granularity. Other functions can be added later, for example, 3D maps using geographic information systems technology. Use of GIS and the development of 3D models allows assessment of the impacts of planned buildings on surrounding areas, among other advantages. Another refinement is the use of augmented reality, which provides real-time information to smartphone users, collected from smart infrastructure, the Internet of Things, sensors, and geospatial open data networks, which can be accessed by simply pointing a device at a building, property, or location. Let's move on to the area of safe, clean, and efficient transport. New transport technologies are fundamental to smart cities. In the realm of public transport, unified systems of electronic ticketing using single cards are quick and convenient to use and save money for operators. Smartphone-based apps allow users to plan journeys by public transport and act as payment cards too. Fitting global positioning system technology to public transport vehicles allows the operator to track the position of the vehicle and share that data with passengers. Traffic can be monitored in real time and action taken to alleviate traffic jams using CCTV cameras connected to a central control room. Connected traffic lights receive data from sensors under the road and adjust their timing automatically to respond to traffic, thereby reducing traffic congestion. Smart lanes automatically warn drivers about queues or lane closures, giving them ample time to change lanes. Cars equipped with connected vehicle technology are linked to the internet by Wi-Fi, enabling them to share data with digital infrastructure platforms and allowing the driver to locate vacant e-parking bays or EV charging docks. Self-driving cars are connected vehicles that move from place to place autonomously, employing artificial intelligence and sensors. They can select the optimum route, avoiding traffic congestion using digital maps. Smart streetlights can be connected to central control points by Wi-Fi. They can also host other services such as public Wi-Fi, EV charging points, and pollution sensors. Moving on to the diversity of urban life. Public Wi-Fi is one of the building blocks of a smart city. It enables citizens to access online services for free. Smart cities can help citizens and visitors to access local culture more effectively. An interactive tourism information center will make information available digitally on screens in addition to hard copies. The Culture and Events app enables the user to search for nearby events and cultural sites. Collecting data from visitors can be used to enhance the visitor experience. The feedback is provided digitally and helps to inform policy towards developing cultural sites, helping to identify where improvements are needed. The use of augmented reality technology can also improve the visitor experience by providing additional imagery and historical or cultural details. Next comes social justice and opportunity. A single social card holds a citizen's unique personal identity and allows them to access a variety of government social services. This can be used in conjunction with a safe and secure online portal for accessing public services. Digital libraries arrange, interpret, and preserve collections of digital works so that they are readily and economically available to all. Students who are physically separated from a teacher and other students can receive teaching via an e-school platform. An e-platform for disabled people would provide them and their carers with a one-stop shop that aggregates information on services for disabled people from all levels of government, NGOs, charities and other service providers. E-health is the delivery of healthcare services via digital means. It allows the sharing of patient data and information between healthcare professionals, remote diagnosis and treatment, ordering diagnostic tests and transmitting the results electronically, and prescribing drugs and therapies, including electronic prescriptions from doctors to pharmacists. An app for emergency vehicles helps citizens to call the right emergency service anywhere in the city and shares the person's location with the service concerned. Last but by no means least is the theme Sustainable City Environment. Of crucial importance for reducing greenhouse gases is the switch from fossil fuels towards renewable energy. Switching to electrically powered vehicles, including cars, buses, and little vehicles, such as e-bikes and e-scooters, is a prerequisite. Older polluting vehicles can be removed from the road by scrappage schemes or downright bans. Smart energy meters permit the energy provider to issue more accurate bills and trace energy losses and power cuts. Consumers can monitor their energy usage more easily. Smart water meters perform the same role for water consumption. Recycling services drive down the use of landfill, segregating waste streams and recovering reusable materials, or energy, helping to drive down greenhouse gas emissions. Zero waste goes further and aims to bring about a change in consumption habits and the redesign of industrial products so that they can be recycled more easily. An air pollution app enables citizens to see data collected by local air pollution monitors on a smartphone. Embedded and remote sensors can be used to measure pollution levels in waste landfill sites in real time, supplementing or replacing on-site inspections. Green buildings use less energy and water, are sited carefully to take advantage of the position of the sun, generate less waste and safer and more comfortable, generate less waste, are safer and more comfortable to live in, boosting quality of life and health. Many's already spoken at some length about the impact of COVID-19. I'll just say a few remarks about how they're likely to reshape cities. To begin with, the pandemic has exposed weaknesses in the way in which we come to focus so much of our economic activity in cities and begs the question whether urbanization has made combating the pandemic more difficult. Of course, cities have had to adapt to health threats before. London, where I'm speaking from, did so in the 19th century when faced with cholera. Rather than undermining the rationale for cities, COVID-19 shows how smart cities can play a more effective role in combating the pandemics of the future. According to Gensler Research and Insight, this could involve a move towards greater decentralization and the creation of self-sufficient districts, such as the 15-minute city concept being promoted in Paris. Improved digital connectivity makes home working feasible for many office workers. Offices could be relocated in smaller buildings, scattered among residential areas, as social distancing requirements make giant office blocks less viable. Decentralization will help reduce the pressure on overstretched public transport networks with their inherent attendant health risks. More use of e-vehicles will also drive down congestion on public transport. Building designs are also likely to change. Apart from being more environmentally sustainable, smart cities are likely to see buildings that can respond more flexibly to health threats, contain materials that are less prone to facilitating transmission of viruses, and have better ventilation. Older office buildings that are less easy to adapt could be demolished or converted to residential use. Improved digital connectiveness makes it easier to deploy apps that can help with pandemic contact tracing and share the data in real time. COVID-19 has, of course, already led to the delivery of more health services online. Next, I'd like to talk about the policy implications of building smart cities. They are, of course, many. Building smart cities relies upon a firm foundation of policies, regulations, and laws. And these operate at both the national and the municipal level. At the national level, it's very important for the government to be strongly committed to smart city development. And this is an absolute prerequisite if a country is going to go down that road. Promoting smart cities will enable governments to meet their obligations under international climate change agreements and the Sustainable Development Goals. Laws must permit private sector access to 4G, 5G, and terrestrial telecoms infrastructure, fiber to the home, or last mile solutions. They do not exist in many emerging economies, but are taken for granted in mature city economies. Laws should facilitate e-governance, the integration of ICT into processes to allow governments to deliver services to the public. Moving to data protection laws, there is a balance to be struck between permitting open data and protecting the personal data of individuals. Open data websites are necessary to allow citizens to inform themselves about local and national government services. But e-health delivery relies on protecting the data of individuals. Strong data protection regimes also facilitate e-commerce. Finance and investment laws may need reform. These include the PPP investment type laws, policies and controls over public and private engagement. PPPs have an important role to play as vehicles for investment in infrastructure, but must be carefully regulated to protect the interests of the taxpayer. Central government must also empower municipalities to play their pivotal role. At the municipal level, the municipal government must commit to a long-term process of development. It has to adopt new policies and adapt regulations in line with new powers and responsibilities trickled down from above. Those powers are likely to include, for example, protecting the environment, raising private finance issuing PPP tenders, providing more control over planning or rezoning city districts. The municipality must adopt an overall smart city strategy with a clear timeline. Given the important role of the private sector in delivery, it may be necessary to upskill municipal staff to manage the delivery of contracts with the private sector. It's also likely to involve changes to the city administration structure to make delivery easier. The amount of effort required for this preparatory work should not be underestimated. I'd now like to hand over to John, if I may.
Thank you very much, Paul. And also thank you to Manny. Thank you everyone who's joining us in this webinar. I see a lot of friends and associates, clients from around the world in the public sector. And I'm also very interested to see a lot of private sector technology players at this webinar. So we look forward very much to any comments and views that you have in the last few minutes of this webinar. Just want to remind you of the two polls that have been uploaded. Be very pleased if you could take a look at those and share your views about the size of the city you are calling from and the nature of your economy, if it's a developed economy, transition, or developing economy. And we have one more poll relevant to this final session regarding your city's administration and what their challenges are. So I'll just ask Zoeb at AIM to kindly upload that. So please make your selection there. I see also some of you are keen to get copies of this webinar and of course a smart city checklist, which is what we would like to provide you. Just click on the links that you'll see in these presentations, the hyperlink. You can type it in somewhere else, or leave us your email address or your LinkedIn address or LinkedIn details, and we'll make sure that you receive it. So the last session I wanted just to run through was to talk about the 2 or 3 key things, and particularly about the critical success factors for smart cities in this post-pandemic period. Also to look at a few case studies from around the world. I think that's an important factor for us to consider and to see how smart cities might apply to your particular economies. And then a checklist to take smart city ideas forward over a medium term, that is up to say 10 years. In fact, I would say a rolling 10-year period is what every city should be looking to do, to adopt and embrace new technologies for the better of the citizens. So here is a beautiful landmark on the planet. I'm sure many of you recognize it straight away. It's certainly one of the most exciting cities, and many of you will know that it's Cape Town. I was interested in Cape Town, as in many other cities in Africa and elsewhere. Cape Town is a very interesting, well-known, world-known city economy with a population of around 4 million inhabitants. It has a dynamic enterprise economy. I'm not just saying that because Leanne and a few others from the Cape are listening. It is a very interesting economy with a talented, educated workforce and a good per capita GDP. When you look at the planning efforts of the city administration, you'll see that the city is focusing in on some of the smart related issues. You'll see that it has 5 strategic focus areas and 11 priorities to take forward the integrated development of the city for its citizens over the next few years. So there are obviously some excellent steps being taken by the city of Cape Town, and it's certainly one to be admired for many reasons. At the same time, like a lot of cities, especially those in developing economies, it is struggling to cope with the attractiveness of the city for creating jobs. In this case, an example of some of the informal settlements that need more economic and urban support. And that is part of the issue with smart cities development in especially in emerging and developing economies. So when we look at Cape Town, it's just one example. Is it a world city? Yeah, definitely. Is it a smart city? In many ways. Is it a well-run city? And that is the subject of the poll that we asked you. I think in many ways Cape Town is a very good example of a well-run city administration. Although as those of us who are interested in South Africa and in Cape Town will know that Cape Town does have some of the challenges of providing a safe city environment and even some natural resources. It's known for its water shortages at times. So these are some of the issues, you could say, critical success factors in managing a city environment for its citizens and for the continued attraction of business and economic opportunities in the future. I've just listed out a few of the topics that we've noticed working with cities around the world that really are, I would say, they are critical success factors, not just for managing cities, but in this case for driving smart cities of the future. City management, I think that is probably the most important issue. Is the city well managed? And alongside that, are its finances in good shape? And we know, unfortunately, that several cities are often facing bankruptcy, even in the most prosperous and developed of economies, United States, for example. So it's not an easy task to manage a city and to manage the finances. Part of that is the leadership and vision that the city's administration, especially the city mayor or the leader, these are important things that make quite a difference in the longer term. And the reputation of public officials. Do they have a good reputation? Do they have the backing of their citizens and especially stakeholders from the private sector and other parts of maybe central or federal government? Also, we find that a lot of citizens will distrust new ideas. So if the city administration wishes to introduce new ideas, even in my own city of London, you will often get a backlash from citizens who are dragging out the application and the adoption of new ideas. Paul mentioned issues around policy and how that needs to develop in order to improve on smart city environment. One of the key issues, of course, is data protection, since a lot of smart city solutions are data-driven involving big data, captured through the Internet of Things, and so on. So these are big issues, policy issues along with local governance. These are challenges for any city going forward. One way forward, if you have endless funds and lots of space, is to look at ways of creating new cities. And this, as you will see, is a major opportunity. We see it with much excitement. I'm sure you do too. Either new cities or totally new recreated suburbs, maybe some of the brownfield areas of established cities that are no longer needed for their original purpose. And so that is often one of the best ways to go forward when looking at smart city adoption. And that would be to look at communities or suburbs or totally new areas and work from the scratch over a 15, 20-year period. So countries like China, Saudi Arabia, this is very much something that they can do, and you can see a couple of examples here. So that is really a very good way forward. And as I said, in developed economies, we're looking at things like city center redevelopments, brownfield site redevelopments, and repurposing. For many cities, though, this is the challenge. The cities have been growing at a rapid pace without the finances or even the management to manage the rapid influx of citizens from the countryside or the mountains. So there we have the issue of uncontrolled expansion, and that is often caught up with poor planning, poor infrastructure, heavy congestion, environmental issues everywhere, pollution, and it's often sometimes accompanied by challenges in governing those city environments. So the way forward for smart cities in developing countries, of course, is going to be, again, quite a different set of priorities. And whether it's a developing country or a developed economy, finance is clearly right there at the heart of everything. And there's often concern about whether it should just be a purely public sector, government-funded activity, as is usually the case with cities that have their annual budgets, they have their maintenance and repair budgets and reinvestment budgets, but usually that's not going to be enough to create a smart city infrastructure and environment for the next 20 or 30 years. So that's where we need to look at opportunities to bring in other forms of investment. Of course, municipalities, cities can usually have some kind of legislation and regulations to raise municipal bonds, to borrow funds for the longer term. And we've seen that happening in many cities and actually in provinces and regions, as well as countries over the last few months, raising a lot of funds to get through the COVID pandemic. So raising new forms of finance with 50 to 100-year paybacks is not an unusual situation to see, yet the policies are not always in place for that. Another sort of midterm financing option would be the PPP, the public-private participation, the concession opportunities. These kind of private sector financing initiatives again, need other sets of national regulations and laws to manage and control them, and often need national oversight, even if they're going to apply at a city level. So if you are thinking about big steps forward to implement smart city environments, you're going to need to consider how the private sector is going to get involved in your very much public sector initiative. Other easier ways in, at maybe smaller scale, but definitely in the test phases of smart city ideas, is the notion of sponsorship, so advertising or sponsorship of new initiatives, or running a series of test or pilot smart city projects. And that's where the private sector, of course, with its interests at heart, will be very happy to join in with cities that can show off their technologies. Now let me just take a quick look at the poll, the challenges for your city. We'll just quickly take a look. Let me just see if it's there. Well, it looks like city leadership is the biggest issue. City leadership, and shortly after that we have pollution, environmental issues, and that's often linked with transportation issues. So pollution, environmental issues, uncontrolled growth, yes, it's up there high, but the highest one above all is city leadership. Very interesting point. Thank you for your feedback. So now taking choices to go forward over the next 10 years, whether you're a developing economy or a smart city from a mature economy in North America or Europe or Asia, what would be the steps that you should take? The second point I've got here on the critical list is who should lead the smart city projects and the creation of those, because it's actually a unique set of stakeholders that need to come together: public, private, city-based, municipal, and central players. All need to come together to drive those smart city long-term approaches. We suggest to most people we view it's not a 1 or 2 year time scale and a bit of branding and some smart ideas on your website to attract foreign direct investment. No, it's going to be at least a 10-year rolling transition to create a smart city environment. There are opportunities to attract FDI, but there are also opportunities to attract international private sector investment, which don't necessarily classify as foreign direct investment. So I just got a few points here in these last few slides, a kind of checklist of points that may typically feature for a developing economy smart city. I put in there under the first column what would typically be on a smart city, an emerging smart city's 2 to 3 year horizon. So you would definitely be looking at piloting new transport solutions, certainly looking at ways to promote cleaner, safer, and more accessible city for everyone. Most cases, developing economy cities, as well as mature economies cities, are looking to embrace e-government solutions. In the UK, we see more and more of that happening, and I think COVID has definitely been a stimulus to driving e-government solutions. But also a big issue is actually digitizing the urban planning process, making sure that all maps and graphs and charting efforts are put on digital maps and that are then shared with the community, with local stakeholders. These are just some of the short-term imperatives that would apply perhaps to some emerging economy cities. In a 5-year timescale, you'll see there some other issues, certainly things like regulations and planning infrastructure. These are the kind of initiatives that need to be taking place on the medium-term timescale. So we think policy issues must be addressed for the long-term benefit. If they are not, if you tend to skate over them, they will come back and hit you badly as you fail to implement your smart city vision. In 5 years, the same again. We heard from Paul about transport systems and solutions, smart data-driven solutions using cloud-based systems, Internet of Things, sensors everywhere to both monitor pollution, monitor the flows of traffic in the city, and even do other things to help improve maintenance and repair of the environment. And there's a little table there about Colorado Springs in the United States, a very much advanced economy with I would say, a modest and realistic selection of smart city concepts that it's adopting over the next few years. And also more there in terms of dealing with citizen solutions, as one of the models that Paul indicated was based very much on meeting the needs of the citizens of cities in the future. So things like the transformation of public services, whether that's education, health, municipal services, registering for everything you need to in a city, e-banking, payments, everything is obviously in many mature economies, most of that is already heavily influenced by smart technologies. Obviously the pedestrianization and of course other forms of mobility within the city. The short-term mobility solutions over a few hundred meters. We've seen in many cities now the use of not only bicycles, but the so-called peer-to-peer electric scooters, and in future the same for electric taxis and so on. And the same in the 5-year period, they monitor the environment, constant environmental management to make sure the city is improving its standards according to world environmental standards. And then in the long term, we fully expect in a 10-year time frame to see a lot more cities and even governments working on e-governments, e-voting systems that are totally reliable and secure from interference. That's not happening as such as yet, but you can look at cities in Estonia, for example, a small economy where e-voting is taking place. It is generally very robust, but it is gradually being adopted by the city and its citizens. So I think that's the last slide I wanted to highlight in this vision of Smart City. I wanted to thank all of you for your time in participating. Maybe what we could do is take any questions that you may have. And I'm going to turn to my colleagues, Manny and Paul, if they would like to pick out any of the questions you've seen in the question area and to respond to them. Manny, would you like to go ahead for anything that you notice?
Well, sure. I have seen a couple of several questions that came my way, which I've answered. But I think one important question that I had to see was in terms of what will be the impact of COVID on traditional and modern manufacturing industries. I think it was a pretty interesting question because I believe even if you start to see the way, I mean, just in UAE is a great example, right? So we have a new ministry altogether that has been created on industrial manufacturing and technology. So the amount of emphasis that's going to be placed on the future of manufacturing is an industry 4.0, and you already start to see the smart manufacturing concepts, which is probably more in terms of early stages, is going to be more, I would say, accelerated in terms of automation, the robots that are going to be deployed in terms of the human capital where we don't really need it, and AI starting to play a major role. 3D printing, 5D printing, nanotechnology, all of those technologies which were quite in the early stages of being implemented now will get more accelerated. So I will say that you need to think about, okay, there is one is on set of technology itself. The other one is about how do you actually upskill your workforce. I think this is going to be a major challenge for governments going forward, because now you will have to, I mean, you have got traditional players, traditional workforce, which has been there for a long time. And now they got to all of a sudden wake up and say, okay, now, you know what, this is not going to be the reality. We're going to walk up to a new reality where there's going to be more technology that's going to be used. So how do I adopt myself? So where do I bring those skills? Where do I get those? How do I get upskilled? So I think as much as this new technology, also companies, countries rather, starting to look at how do they increase or upskill their workforce, which is part of what the presentation that I made, just to talk about the workforce and the future of work itself might change. So yes, there's going to be huge implications for the traditional and the modern manufacturing industries.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, Manny. Let's hope that is very much the case. Paul, is there anything that struck you in the questions put that you can see there?
Yes, I think I might comment on a question which asks whether locations that have had low impacts from COVID-19 or have been seen to manage the pandemic proactively be seen as more attractive for FDI. And obviously, the pandemic is a completely unexpected, or more or less unexpected, bolt from the blue that's had an extraordinary transformative effect on the global economy, and the shock waves are going to be felt for some time. Insofar as FDI is motivated by the desire to seek and access markets or access technologies, it seems probable that the pandemic could have an impact on FDI. We already know, of course, that flows have collapsed to a large degree, that countries which have made a better fist of fighting off the virus probably will be more successful in the short term in attracting FDI, particularly market-seeking FDI, and I think probably also efficiency-seeking FDI. On the other hand, there is so much sort of general noise connected with the pandemic and its impact on the economy that actually attributing particular changes to a collapse in confidence in the market, as opposed to the overall impact on the world economy on FDI flows, it may be difficult to actually to see that. And one would expect that as hopefully vaccines are found, the situation will stabilize and we will go back to, if not the situation before, because I think that is not going to happen, at least we will see improved confidence, and some of these markets which have not done very well in managing the pandemic, will see a recovery.
Thank you very much, Paul. That's very good points. I'd just like to raise one final question that was picked out by Javier Vilalta from Barcelona in Spain, in Catalonia, obviously very much a smart city, and was asking if the future of cities, smart cities, is it primarily for local economic development, small enterprises, or is there a role for international and foreign direct investment? I think my view is that it should be a place for every form of business. Local, definitely. Cities are the place to support, especially tech and other enterprising startups. Those that need ideas, they need access to connections, they need financial support, they need business angel support, they need international connections. I think more smart cities will need to continue to work on their tech hub spaces, especially for those tech-driven business opportunities. And secondly, I think, yes, cities are going to suffer in the short term from international FDI. As you've said, Paul, FDI flows are dramatically affected at the moment. But I think those will come back to all economies to benefit from. And that's where I think the proactive government and city promoters can really focus in on the future that their city offers as a smart environment for those international businesses. So that's a really good question, and I hope that that's a useful comment. There was a high-scoring comment was, will these presentations be made available to participants? Yes, just please leave your details here or check back on the AIM Congress website or contact us through our LinkedIn profiles, or finally the little URL you see on our slides, and we'll make sure that you get the profile and the Smart City Strategy checklist. So I'm going to pass over to our host. Thank you very much for hosting us, and leave you to do the closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. John, Mr. Mani, and Mr. Paul for conducting an insightful workshop. I would like to thank once again our multilateral partner, Islamic Corporation, for the development of the private sector for sponsoring today's webinar. I would also like to thank our audience for joining us and sharing their questions. The link to today's webinar video and presentation will be sent to you via email. We are also conducting a short survey to get your feedback on today's webinar. The link to the survey will be shared with you via the chat and via email. To register for our next webinar scheduled on the 23rd of July 2020, please visit our website at www.aimcongress.com/webinars. Also, follow us on our social media channels to keep yourself updated. Thank you all once again. We look forward to seeing you on the 23rd of July on our next webinar series.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.